Now, as I understand your testimony, Dr. Welcher, you believe that it's possible that the Lexus taillight could have caused these wounds to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm. Is that correct?
Correct.
And more specifically, it's your belief that the lacerations would have been caused by the vehicle scratching Mr. O'Keefe's arm as it drives past him. Is that correct?
I don't know, I'd characterize it that way. What happens is, this 6,000-pound vehicle is coming and he's standing on a, icy, snowy roadway area, and it's going to contact him and move his whole body and induce rotation.
Right. So it's going to contact him and, under your theory, induce rotation. So wouldn't such a movement of the car relative to his right arm result in horizontal injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's arm, as can be seen on his bicep above the elbow?
So could we pull up one of my slides to address this issue?
Sir,
I'd like to answer your question with a slide that I have that addresses this exact point.
I'd like to stay with this slide, Dr. Welcher, and see if you can answer my questions off of this slide. So I'll repeat it.
Sure.
Do you agree that the injuries up at the upper part, where you're familiar with the bicep brachialis?
I am.
And aren't those two up at the top, right over the bicep brachialis?
They're actually about midway between the biceps and the triceps.
Right. So you know which two I'm talking about, the two up there. Can you just use your laser pointer just so we're talking about the same two? Do you have one?
I'll give it a try, but the upper ones...
I know it's not your fault, but
on the
sometimes
image,
it doesn't
the
show.
upper left.
Yes.
I mean, technically, the ones right to the right of that are also on the biceps and triceps.
Right, but
the
I'm talking
biceps goes all the way to the elbow, so do the triceps.
Right, so I'm talking about the two that are the farthest up.
Correct.
All right. Would you agree that those are in a horizontal orientation?
Generally, yes, which is what you'd expect with your arm like this and the tail light coming across like this, which is what I showed in my slides.
My questions are trying to keep this moving. I just asked if those are in a horizontal orientation.
Yeah,
Yes
more or
no?
less. They're angled down slightly, but more or less horizontal.
Okay. Isn't it true that if Mr. O'Keefe's arm were to be flexed like it was with the test subject in your blue paint test, the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's forearm would be oriented in a vertical direction?
Absolutely not. If you pull up my slide 117, it'll show exactly that it is like perfectly horizontal. When you're standing like this, and this is the tail light, the laceration, when it comes across here and pushes my body, it's going to make a horizontal laceration because the 6,000-pound vehicle is going to push me out of the way. As this pushes me out of the way, it's going to drag and create a horizontal laceration across my arm. This is exactly what you'd expect.
So let's talk about the forearm, sir. We may have miscommunicated. I'm talking about the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's forearm now.
So we're switching from the arm to the forearm.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Wouldn't those be oriented in a vertical direction?
No. Again, you have the vehicle. If this is me and this is the car, it's pushing and pushing across like this. And with your arm bent like this, it's going to cause laceration as it pushes my arm away. It pushes like that.
Okay, I got it.
My slide shows this quite clearly.
So you disagree. You do not agree that the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's forearm, under your theory, would be oriented in a vertical. You disagree with that. It's just want to get that on the record.
I disagree with that.
Okay. Now, also, do you understand that under your theory of injury here, that there would be injuries caused in two different directions by the same movement of the car. Agree or disagree?
I'm going to say I disagree. You need to give me a little more. You're going to have, again, this is a glancing or a clipping type impact. And so it's going to be it's going to sweep across the arm, which is what causes the horizontal lacerations.
We're talking about a flat surface, right, sir?
Approximately, yes.
And therefore, you would have to maintain contact with the arm as the car moves. Am I correct about that?
Maintain contact with the arm? I'm unclear what you mean.
What I'm trying to do, sir, is to get under your theory, right, given the contact that you've described, what would you expect to be the orientation of the wounds to the upper part of the arm and to the lower part of the arm?
Just like it's shown in this photograph.
Okay. Isn't it the case with your theory that the tail light would have to break, and after the break, the arm would have to maintain contact with the arm as the car moves?
So that is what happens in pedestrian contacts. There is a contact duration. For example, you asked me earlier in that calculation you had me ran, you said 0.01 seconds. That was the contact duration. So when you have things like this, and that's why you have to allow, if you do testing, the body to move, because the car is going to hit the body, it's going to cause it to move, the body's going to rotate away, and the car is going to continue on in that clipping type impact. So the arm is definitely in contact with the rear of the car for some time.
That's what I wanted to get to, is simply that under your theory, the taillight would break, and also the arm would need to maintain contact with the taillight area as the car moves. Is that your supposition?
So at a point in time, it'll stop contact. But the 6,000-pound vehicle is going to want to continue moving on. It's going to push. It's going to initially contact the arm and then push the arm away as it rotates the body. So yes, it's going to maintain contact until the clipping is over and the vehicle continues on.
So my next question is simply, how long do you believe the arm needs to maintain contact with the taillight after, under your theory, it breaks, to produce those types of wounds that you say came from a taillight?
We don't have enough information to determine that.
Right. You don't have enough information to make that determination, do you, sir?
Correct.
And
but we know because of the laws of physics that it has to be some amount of time. It doesn't occur instantaneously.
so now we do apply the laws of physics to the right arm that weren't applied before because you applied a paint experiment. Is that correct? You're now applying the laws of physics to the injury to the right arm. But you didn't do that in your report.
Nope, always applied the laws of physics. The paint experiment, as you're referring to it, was to look at basically the orientation of the scratches that matched this. So that was an engineering experiment to correlate height, position of the taillights relative to height, orientation of the lacerations on Mr. O'Keefe's arm.
You just said, sir, if I heard you correctly, you, to answer my previous question, applied the laws of physics. That's what you just said, correct?
So the laws of physics cover more than Newton's second law. There's a whole law of physics. The whole field of physics is a broad subject. So a simple measurement of height is a physical measurement.
Sir, I have your entire report in my hand, right here. Where in the report do you apply the law of physics to the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe? Where?
So in the paint experiment we did, the laws of physics about gravity, orientation, things like that, I didn't apply Newton's second law as we already went through. But again, those simple positions, arm angles, the possible physical arm angles, those are all generally governed by the laws of physics. The laws of physics are very broad.
Sir, I'll ask it this way. Where in your 14-page report do you even mention the laws of physics related to the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe?
So in terms of applying the laws of physics.
I'm not asking applying, just where in the report is it mentioned law of physics relative to the right arm? Can you point me to where?
I would write a report that said these are the laws of physics. I would say these are the numbers, but for example, the timing in GPS, how a clock times, the concept of a second, what does that mean? Those are all concepts of physics. So the timing, the GPS, the mileage, how we calculate the mileage, those are all based on the laws of physics.
I'm talking about injuries to the right arm.
That's not what you asked. You asked me about my whole report.
Sir, if you could, please, I just need to finish my question. Where in your report do you use any laws of physics in connection with injuries to the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe? Can you point me to a word or a page in your report?
Yes.
Where?
2A. 2A Roman numeral 1. 2A Roman numeral 2. 2A Roman numeral 3, 2A Roman numeral number 4, 2A Roman numeral number 5.
Sir, I followed all of it, but what I'm asking about is where in all of what you just mentioned is the word right arm? I'll take what you just said. Where in 2A and all of those is the word right arm? Where is it?
Oh, sorry, it's in number 3.
So let's go to 3. You state the location and orientation of the laceration on John O'Keefe's right forearm and right arm are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right tail light of the Reed 2021 Lexus LX 570. Where?
Can you read the next sentence?
I'm sorry. Is it see PowerPoint slides 102, 120, correct?
Correct.
All right. I want to just start with the report. Did you apply any force analysis to support 3?
So in terms of the force analysis, I did not do an F equal MA analysis, but in terms of, say, the contact pattern, I obviously had to apply some force, even at 2 miles an hour, to do that.
So the answer is, what you cited, number 3, you did not use a force analysis, correct?
So force was applied to my arm in the paint test. I didn't do an F equals MA force analysis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now let's go to the horizontal movement we were talking about with regard to the car. And you can agree or disagree.
Sorry, the picture's done.
I'm sorry, we'll take that down. Do you agree or disagree that given a horizontal movement of the car, vertical lacerations would be an inconsistent injury pattern?
So horizontal motion generally will cause a horizontal laceration. You can get what are called stellate, which are a blunt force, and it causes a splitting of the skin as well. But generally, when the vehicle is clipping or running horizontal across it, it will generally cause horizontal lacerations. But when you have a fractured taillight, you can get pieces going off in other directions. So it's not necessarily going to be perfectly horizontal.
So my question is, not with clipping, you keep inserting clipping into my question. My question is this. If you're given a horizontal movement of the car, do you agree that it's more likely than not that vertical lacerations would be an inconsistent injury pattern?
I'm trying to help you, but you got to give me more. So, is it a clipping contact or is it not a clipping contact? Is it a direct in the center of the car impact?
Okay, are there only two variables you need to answer the question?
But this is a good start.
All right, so let me do it this way. You can't answer the question on a general basis of whether there's horizontal movement of a car, whether vertical lacerations would be an inconsistent injury pattern. You can't answer that question without more information. Is that your answer?
So generally, again, horizontal motion should cause horizontal lacerations. But again, it depends on what's being hit.
Okay.
So for example, if I have something that bends as a result of the impact, it could bend up and create a vertical laceration.
So you would agree, based upon what you said, that generally horizontal movement of a car would be expected to cause horizontal lacerations.
Generally.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, during your blue paint test, the blue paint was featured more predominantly on your upper arm than your forearm. Is that correct?
I think it depends on the tests.
Do you want? We bring up a slide. Will that
I'd
help
love
you?
to bring up a slide.
We're going to be running the thing, so we'll just bring one up, and you tell me whether this slide works for you, sir.
Do you want me to tell you the slide I want?
If we could take a shot at it first, and then we may ask you for it. But I think we've got a slide for you. And what number? 111 is on the screen, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is the blue paint more predominantly on your upper arm than your forearm? Is there more blue paint on your upper arm than your forearm?
Probably. This is the one where I actually walked sideways into the back of the car. The one where the car is moving is probably a little better representation.
Sir, I'm just asking you a question about this slide. If you
Okay,
could just focus on this slide here, and if you can't answer it, so be it.
I just answered it.
Is the blue paint featured more predominantly on your upper arm than your forearm?
It sort of looks like it. I didn't actually measure the total area of it.
All right. So on direct, you stated that in order for the injuries on Mr. O'Keefe's forearm to have been caused by an impact with the taillight, his arm would have needed to be held outstretched as you did in your demonstration, correct?
You would need some degree of outstretch, yes.
Yes. So isn't that an example of confirmation bias?
No, that's matching the contact pattern to the injuries.
But don't you have to select among other choices this outstretching of the arm? You had to make that selection from among others, correct?
So that was matching the physical evidence on his arm to the physical evidence on the car, and then running a test to see if dynamically those matched up. So it's, I didn't have it hit the exhaust pipe, for example, because there was no assertion it hit the exhaust pipe. There was no damage to the exhaust pipe. So it was based upon the evidence, and the testing was done to test, to use your vernacular, the hypothesis that that's where it came from.
Sir, have I ever asked you anything about a tailpipe in any of my questions today?
Yes.
I have not. I've never
Yes,
asked.
you have. You asked me about the totality of the rear of the Lexus, which includes the tailpipe.
All right. I am not going to be asking any questions that involve the taillight in any fashion. So what I'd like to do is to go back to the question that I'm asking, which is, did you consider as part of the scientific method, in terms of more than one hypothesis, did you consider in your analysis any other orientation of Mr. O'Keefe other than the one you selected for your paint test?
Yes.
And where is that consideration of other hypotheses stated in any report?
It's not. I was just looking at the damage that was up on the sheet metal.
Okay. So, are you saying that you considered other orientations of Mr. O'Keefe relative to the vehicle as part of your analysis?
In terms of where exactly the hand would be, some slight different angles in the forearm, which is from the elbow to the hand. I did consider that, but all the physical testing is done with the hand hitting the approximate center of the taillight.
As I heard it to the last part, just hypotheses. You would agree that even though hypotheses can be created and changed perhaps all the way up to the end, you would agree that it's important in the analysis to create at least some hypotheses, plural, in the beginning, correct?
Yes.
And once you create these hypotheses, would you agree that those hypotheses should be tested?
So if you take the word testing to mean testing compared to testimony, compared to physical evidence, yes.
And when you test those hypotheses, isn't it often the case that, particularly in your line of work, the one that most consistently produces the same injury will emerge as the mechanism of injury?
I guess it depends on the scientific evidence behind it. Again, sometimes we get very unique injuries.
So my question, sir, is this. Isn't it the case that when you have multiple hypotheses,
Well, hypotheses.
the one that most, out of all of them, it's a relative thing, the one that most consistently produces the same injury emerges as the mechanism of injury? Is that a fair statement?
I think generally, again, it's on a case-by-case basis. You have to look at the science and the facts of what you're basing it upon. I think as a general premise, what you're saying is accurate,
Okay,
but there's exceptions.
fair enough. But as a general principle,
Sure.
with some exceptions, that's a fair statement, correct?
Yes, sir.
We're going to have several topics, sir, and what I'm going to try to do to make it a little clear is I'm going to say when I'm switching topics.
Oh, good.
So what I'd like to do now is switch topics.
Okay.
You're aware that the Massachusetts State Police has troopers who specialize in accident reconstruction, correct?
Yes.
And there are troopers within the Massachusetts State Police Collision Analysis and Reconstruction section whose sole responsibility is to engage in accident reconstruction. Do you know that?
I do not know that.
Do you know that there are troopers within the Massachusetts State Police Collision Analysis and Reconstruction section who engage in accident reconstruction?
Just based on what I've seen in this case.
Right. Based upon what you've seen in the case, that's a fair statement.
And I just know that those people are doing it.
Are you familiar with a Massachusetts State Trooper named Joseph Paul, P-A-U-L?
Yes.
And you
Well,
know...
I'm familiar with his reports. I don't know the man.
Okay. Familiar with Trooper Paul through his reports in this case, correct?
Correct.
And are you aware that he was assigned by lead investigator, former Trooper Michael Proctor, to be a constructionist in this case on January 29th of 2022, as evidenced by that report or those reports of Trooper Paul? Do you know that?
Well, you put a lot of things in there. I know he issued a reconstruction report. I don't know who told him to do it. So the first party question, I don't know, but I did see a reconstruction report from him.
You were retained, and so do you recall, is it the date, January 29th of 2022, is that a rough time period of him being assigned, or you don't know when he was assigned?
Don't know. That might have been in his report, but I wouldn't have paid attention to when he received an assignment.
Do you know when, the date of the first report of Trooper Joseph Paul in this case?
I can pull it up. I do not know off the top of my head.
You know that the date of the incident in question is January 29th, 2022, correct?
Correct.
Yet your firm and you were retained for this case by the Commonwealth 2.5 years after the incident in question. You were retained, your firm, on September 23rd, 2024. Is that correct, sir?
No, I believe we were retained a couple days before that.
A couple days. Okay.
Correct.
So
Actually, I might be able to find out if you'd like me to look at the documents.
it's not all that important. You would say it's within a week of September 23rd, 2000. It was in September of 2024?
I believe it was in September, yes.
Right.
I would
So-
want to double check.
That's 2.5 years from the date of the incident in question, if I did the math right, correct?
Oh, I never thought about it. Yeah, approximately.
And as we just discussed, and you stated on your direct examination, you have no dog in this fight, correct?
Correct.
On November 5th of 2024, your firm Aperture was paid $44,500 by the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office to conduct work that was at least similar to the work of Trooper Paul, correct?
I have no idea. I don't get the billing or the statements.
Do you recall whether Aperture has, well, do you believe Aperture is working for free in this matter?
Oh, no, I don't believe that. No,
So
we're
you
an
would-
engineering company. We bill for our time.
So you know that Aperture is getting paid for its work in this case, correct?
We are billing for our analysis work.
Well, you're not just billing, you're billing and getting paid, correct?
So I have not seen any of the payments. I would assume that we're getting paid, but I don't know that.
Sir, you are a senior vice president of Aperture, are you not?
I am.
You would know, wouldn't you, if your firm was not getting paid for work since September 23rd of 2024, wouldn't you?
No, probably not. Usually it takes, 9, 10, 12 months of not getting paid before the accounting department reaches out to me.
Exactly. So you've been on this for 2.5 years. So if it would take 9 months or 12 months, if you weren't getting paid, you would have been notified by that by now, correct? According to your own answer you just gave.
I've not been on this case for 2.5 years.
I'm sorry, sir. Let me go back to the question of payment.
Hold on. You said I've been on this case for 2.5 years. I was retained in September 17th-ish of 2024. So that's, less than a year ago.
Understood. I'm moving on to the next question because I want to move away from that discussion and just
Okay.
go right to the billing. You, as you sit here today, do not have a recollection of whether Aperture has been paid. Is that your testimony?
It has nothing to do with recollection. I'm not part of that process. We have an accounting department. I don't have any involvement in that.
Are you, so is your testimony you have no knowledge about any contractual relationship between Aperture and the Commonwealth?
Oh, no. I was sent a contract by the Commonwealth to sign, So I'm aware of the contractual agreement, but the day-to-day or month-to-month invoicing and billing, I'm not involved in that.
Okay, so you're aware there's a contract between Aperture and the Commonwealth,
I signed it.
and you signed it. And wasn't that contract obligating the Commonwealth to pay for the services of Aperture? Isn't that the purpose of the contract, in part?
In part, sure.
Yeah, it's a legal obligation of the Commonwealth. Your firm does work, and the Commonwealth pays for it, correct?
That's the idea.
Right. And so you know about that contract because you signed it.
Correct.
Also, you testified on direct that there was a purchase of a Lexus exemplar for your testing.
Correct.
Who pays for that Lexus exemplar?
Aperture?
And is that then cost passed on to the Commonwealth?
No.
So you pay for the Lexus, you don't pass that cost on, correct?
So what we're doing is we paid for the Lexus, we're keeping it till the trial's over, we're selling it and charging the Commonwealth the difference in the price.
Exactly. That was where I was going, sir. So,
But they're only paying the difference. So, and in theory, if we sell it for more in California, then we'll reduce the bill.
okay, I don't want to speculate. I just wanted to see what the obligation was. So
The
it's-
obligation is the difference.
Exactly. So the obligation is the difference. Are you aware that on April 5th, 2025, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office amended your contract? Are you aware of that, sir?
I am.
And isn't it the case that that amendment authorized the amount of $325,000 to be paid to Aperture? Isn't that what that amendment contract states?
I believe that's correct.
So the Commonwealth is obligated to pay at least $325,000, and is that correct?
That is you're asking me a legal opinion now about a contract. That is my understanding of how contracts work, but I'm certainly not an attorney.
And on top of that, are you aware that Aperture has been already paid $44,510 for its work? Are you aware of that?
The second time you asked me, no, I'm not aware of anything we've been paid.
And as you stated yourself, those amounts reflect, as you say, less than 6 months worth of work?
That's not what I said.
Well, no, my question is, you've been on the case, you said, since September of 2024, when we were talking about dates. You said that was about 6 months that your firm's been retained. Did I have your answer correct about how long you've been on it?
I guess it's closer to 8 months.
All right, so 8 months. So for 8 months of work, about $400,000. Is that correct?
So there's 3 offices working on the case. There's the Boston office, there's Mr. Burgess's office, and there's my office in Long Beach. I only know about the billing from my office.
But you signed the contract on behalf of all of Aperture, not just your office, correct?
That I don't know, but I definitely did sign a contract.
Would it refresh your recollection as to who you signed the contract on behalf of, whether it's all of Aperture in all offices, if I showed you the contract?
Sure.
May I put you on it?
Yes.
May I put you on it?
Yes.
Thank you. Sir, may I
Yeah, could you direct me so we're not wasting time?
Well, what I'd like to do, with the witness, Your Honor, is just ask the witness a question with regard to it.
Why don't you just take a look at that, Dr. Burgess?
Thank you, Your Honor.
And then, when he's done, Mr. Alessi, you can take it back to the podium.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
There you go.
I have a few more questions before I do that, Your Honor, for foundation purposes, if I want to do more than refresh.
All
Or
right,
would you like me to start with
So-
refresh?
go ahead and start with refresh. Go back to the podium, please.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Welcher, does that refresh your recollection as to the contract you signed on behalf of Aperture with the Commonwealth?
So it lists the legal address as my office. So for my office, yes.
So are you saying that therefore, and did you see the amount that was in the contract? Did that refresh your recollection?
Oh, no, I didn't even look at that.
Do you recall the amount that of obligation that the contract relates to in this document? Do you recall that?
You just asked me that earlier, and I'm taking what you said to be true. So I was like $325,000. I have no reason to disbelieve that.
And is there also a total, do you recall the total maximum obligation for the contract that's listed in the contract? You
No.
recall it? May I approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
And Dr. Welcher, I am now going to, you asked me last time, I hope this is helpful.
Please.
You said please point to the applicable part so we can do it faster. I am now pointing to that part and see if you can just look at that and see whether this refreshes your recollection on the maximum obligation of the contract pursuant to this contract. Without saying what it is, just does it refresh your recollection?
No, but I don't have any reason to believe it's not correct. And that is my signature on it.
Right. And we got started on this conversation tying it to, well, we got started on this conversation with regard to a statement you made earlier in your direct that you didn't have any dog in the hunt. You recall that statement in the beginning of your direct testimony.
You misquoted me. I don't have any dog in the fight.
You don't have any dog in the fight.
Correct.
Thank you. Now, switching topics,
Okay.
you submitted an updated PowerPoint presentation, the one that you went over on your direct examination. You created that presentation quite recently, correct, sir?
The updated one was where I had redacted or taken out slides. So in terms of taking out slides, I did add one alternative path a couple weeks ago.
Sharon, did you think Dr. Welcher's recreations were good with the test dummy and the glancing glove?
And the grease paint on his arm? No.
Karen, did you?
And he backed up into himself at 2.2 or something miles per hour. So he tried to dress identically to John, but didn't do anything else to mimic what the Commonwealth is accusing me of.
So did you go in reverse 24 miles an hour, 53 feet?
The data is what the data is, and it's going to come out cleanly, more cleanly in our case in chief. I think it's important to demonstrate what is the Commonwealth accusing me of. The speed, the positioning, recreate that for us. Back up into the crash test dummy at 24.2 miles an hour in the arm and see what happens. That's what I would want to see if I were you.
Do you recall that at all, Karen?
No, because it didn't happen.
Any update on if you're calling Proctor, given that his friends are now witnesses on your list?
No comments. No, come on, these four new witnesses. Say anything about them? Well, no comments. Are you going to take the stand? No comments.
No comments.
Sorry. Somebody asked me if I'm going to take the stand.
Can I say thank you, Chef?
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Touche.
I'll say thank you, Chef.
Thank you, Chef.
I see you cooking stuff up.
Again, it's always good when possible to inspect everything you can inspect.
If you could now begin and tell us how you started your investigation.
Sure. So on September 23rd, I had an opportunity to come out. Mr. Brandon, was the first time I ever met you on that day, I believe. And I had received material before that. And what you see here is, this is my inspection of Miss Reed's vehicle. In the upper left photograph, you'll see, oh, this doesn't work very well. Upper left photograph, that's Miss Reed's vehicle, that's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, the Chevy Traverse. And then what you see here is a laser scanner. You can see it on the ground here. Laser scanner is creating a 3D model of the vehicles. So I use that to create a 3D model of the vehicles. You can see me in the upper right photograph. That watch is this watch right here, my Garmin watch. And what I'm doing is looking at the construction composition of that right rear corner of the bumper. I'm looking at things such as the dimensions, where various lights and components are, and how does the geometry of that bumper relate to things that would be hit when backed into.
Dr. Welcher notes this is 9/23/94. Is that an accurate date of when you came and first started looking at the vehicles in the area?
You said 24, correct?
I did.
You said 9/23/24, correct. And then on the slide, what I tried to do is underline what I'm doing. So this is inspection of the Reed Lexus. And as noted, I'm only showing you a couple. I actually took 445 photographs.
Do you remember when you began this case? The month or the date?
No, it was obviously before this. I had material before I came out to look at the vehicles.
Do you think it was months before this?
I don't think it was months. No, it was maybe a month, if not less.
So you began your work in the fall of 2024?
Correct.
And I just want to ask you about the picture in the middle. You see the right taillight housing is missing. Did you
Correct.
understand that had been removed prior to you looking at the car?
It was, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. However, some of the evidence stickers, these white stickers here, were still on the vehicle.
You did not place those. Did you place those stickers on yourself?
I did not.
Were they there when you first saw the car?
Correct. They match what I'd seen in other photos.
Okay, thank you.
So just continuing on, so what you see is, again, I mentioned looking underneath the bumper. So we wanted to see what, if anything, was damaged on the corner. So I'm putting my hand to show where the frame rail ends. This is me looking up underneath to the back side of this taillight. If you can see, this red taillight actually sticks out. And so I'm checking the front here for damage. I'm checking the back for damage.
1 second, please. Okay, doctor, when you were looking for damage on the previous slide, did you find any damage to that lower right red taillight?
No, there was no damage to the taillight.
The middle picture is from the inside, looking at the inside of that taillight. Was there any damage to the inside of that taillight?
There was not.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So again, looked at the height of it. I mentioned this lower taillight. Notice how the structure of the bumper protrudes out. You can see one of the marks, which is consistent with the contact to Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. Here, this scratch mark, or scuff mark. Notice how close it is to this light. Again, some of the evidence, stickers. Just a better view of those, then going down the side of the vehicle. So with all that information, I mentioned a laser scan. So you move this laser scanner, and each minute and 51 second scan is collecting about 50 million data points. And so you scan all the way around, and then what you do is you merge all that data together. So even though this looks like a poor photograph, what you're seeing is hundreds of millions of photographs, hundreds of millions of points. And so you literally can figure out, if you wanted to know the distance from this lug nut to where the lighter is on the ashtray, you could probably do that to an accuracy of about 2 to 3 millimeters. So really, taking tons and tons of data. So it knows the exact position of every one of these millions of data points, and it knows the color associated with those data points.
Why is that data imaging so important in accident reconstruction?
You want to have an accurate model of the car. So, I mean, you probably don't need literally that many points to get an accurate model, but that's just the nature of the way the science is going. Computers are getting better and faster. Scanners are getting faster. So you get an enormous amount of data when you use these scanners nowadays. So then, as indicated on the underline here, I did a CDR. That's a little different than what you heard me say before. CDR is crash data retrieval. So that's the hardware and software that you use to download or actually copy or take an image of, which means you're just taking an image off what's on the vehicle, the EDR, which is the event data recorder. So you use the crash data retrieval hardware to download the event data recorder, otherwise commonly known as the black box. So I downloaded the black box from this vehicle, and although you can hardly read it here, again, I mentioned there are two systems on this vehicle. This is the CDR system or EDR system. There's also the Techstream. The EDR system, this system is primarily to manage the safety components, protect the occupants of the Lexus. So things like fire the airbag, fire what's called a pretensioner, keep track of the severity of the crash to decide whether we need to fire the airbag. So it's not really designed for pedestrian impacts. So when we downloaded this vehicle, we got what's called a none file. A none file simply means that there's no data there. The system's working properly, we had no fault codes, but for a car hitting a pedestrian to cause a file here, this is really more designed for car-to-car impacts, something that's going to have a significant impact on the occupant of the Lexus. And again, the Lexus is a 6,000-pound vehicle. Mr. O'Keefe's only 216 pounds. So it's not going to register from hitting a pedestrian.
Were you surprised that there was no information about a collision in the EDR?
No, it's exactly what I expected. Okay, I mentioned the second system. So as underlined up here, this is the Techstream. So this is from Toyota Techstream data. You can see the screens here. There's generally two types of files, what's called a vehicle control history and a PCS file. The PCS file is the, God, I forgot the name of it, the protection system. So I also looked at Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. PCS is pre-collision system. Looked at Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, same thing, took a series of photographs, laser scanned it, looked in it, underneath it, behind it. I mentioned taking some of the bumper parts off. So I took this rear cover off here to look at the damage behind the bumper cover. Most cars have what's referred to as a face bar. That's that piece of metal that you see here. And there's a piece of energy absorber here. That's your face bar. So I'm looking to see if there's any damage to that. There was no damage to that.
Before you go forward, I want you to take a couple steps back because I want to ask you some questions to explain
Please.
Techstream data. Could you go back a couple slides, please?
Sure.
Okay. You mentioned that in the EDR, which is similar to a black box, there was no information found. And then you mentioned a different system, the Techstream. Can you make it clear for us how these systems are different and where they're stored on a motor vehicle?
Sure. I mean, a lot of data is stored in a similar location. The Techstream system was originally designed, according to Toyota, for maintenance issues. It seemed to come about around the same time Toyota was having problems with sudden accelerations or allegations of sudden accelerations. So the Techstream data or vehicle control history will give you information when there's, for example, excessive acceleration or rapid shifting of the vehicles, or rapid steering of the steering wheel. So the statements are that that's designed to help the maintenance people, if you come in with a problem with your vehicle, to diagnose what that problem is. It has a lot of utility in accident reconstruction, because if you jam on the brakes before a crash, frequently the Techstream data will record the crash.
You mentioned Toyota a number of times. Could you share with us the relationship between Toyota and Lexus?
Yeah. Sorry, in my mind, they're the same thing. Toyota and Lexus, obviously a little different, but Lexus is basically made by Toyota. So Toyota and Lexus has the Lexus safety system, Toyota has the Toyota safety systems, which you both read with the Techstream data.
The Techstream data, in this case, does it play an important role in your analysis?
I think so, yes.
The Techstream data, did you independently download that data yourself?
So I independently downloaded it, and then I also ran a test with Miss Reed's vehicle, and I created a new Techstream file so that I had a stamp in the ignition cycles of what the current ignition cycle was. So I did a sudden acceleration test of the vehicle.
On the Lexus or on the exemplar vehicle?
On her Lexus.
When you did the downloading, why did you do it yourself?
Again, you, whenever possible, want to be the one that does it, make sure it's done correctly, and be able to say, hey, how do I know that's from that vehicle? Well, I know because I was the one who did it. And so if I get it from someone else, then they frequently have to bring that person into court to say the other ones that did it, so then I can use it. So if I do it myself, it eliminates that problem, and then I have no concerns over where it's coming from. So then I know hey, I did it. This is the right car. This is the right program.
You left us at slide 10 when you were inspecting Mr. O'Keefe's car?
Correct. So again, simply a blue arrow indicating that I looked down behind all this stuff, took measurements of it, and then similarly, I have a 3D point cloud of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. So part of the reason we're making these 3D point clouds, and we'll touch on this further, in addition to the scene, you can then basically put all these things back together in the computer. So instead of having to drive the cars to the scene, for example, or to Mr. O'Keefe's residence, you can take these computer models and additional data and put it back in the computer and reconstruct everything on the computer. So before we had the exact angle of impact, again, this is for looking at when Ms. Reed contacted Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle backing out of Mr. O'Keefe's garage at One Meadows. I lined them up just to generally show the approximate location. A couple things. Notice how, again, this lower portion of the Lexus bumper sticks out. Notice how the side of the Chevrolet slopes in as you get higher up. So this portion sticks out more than this portion. And this is where you would expect any contact damage to occur, assuming there was an impact. So again, looking at the measurements up the height of the vehicle, of course, as you indicated, Mr. Brennan, the taillight's gone. And then went to the scene. So same thing, went to the scene, took, again, 297 photographs of the scene, had our people scan it to create a computer model of the scene. So, literally, if you wanted to know the distance from this window to, say, some manhole cover on the road, we have the data to figure that out, down to a couple millimeters.
In addition to going to the scene and doing the digital mapping, you mentioned other review of materials. Did you have an opportunity to review dash cam footage from Canton Police Department police vehicles to see the general location of where Mr. O'Keefe was when first responders were assisting him?
Objection, Your Honor.
So that's just a yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the Techstream download. So this is a screenshot from the Techstream download. Keep in mind, this is kind of maintenance software. So we're looking at a number of things in the maintenance software. What we see is, and this is noted in the report too, that when the vehicle gets into the Canton Police Department after this event, you can see the mileage is 12,665 miles. So that shows up in Trooper Paul's report. It shows up in the photographs, and it shows up as matching the mileage in the Techstream data, both at triggers 1164 and triggers 1167.
I'd ask you if you can enlarge the data on the right and break down what it actually means, the different columns and the... Is it possible for you to enlarge that?
My fingers are too fat.
Thank you.
Okay. So what you're looking at is what I called event 1162. If you see anything in blue on these charts, that's information that I added. I typically put my initial, JBW, Judson Blair Welcher, that's me. And so this is referred to as the key cycle trip. So key cycle is simply you turn it on, not necessarily turn the ignition on, turn it on, turn it off. That's one key cycle. So I labeled this one 1162-2 because there's also one that's on the same key cycle that I'm calling 1162-1. The system also records the mileage. So again, this is a maintenance system generally. So what you see is the T here is the trigger, and there's a point. So this time in the Techstream data, you could think of it as like a stopwatch. It's when it starts when the car turns on and stops when the car turns off. And then if it sees a triggering event, a T, it records that information. So this is when the trigger happened. So that's 1,142.2 seconds. And so I've converted that to minutes and seconds, because most people don't think in seconds. And so what it also does is once it sees a trigger, it's constantly circulating data through the computer. So when it says, okay, we have a trigger, it saves 5 seconds before the trigger and then 5 seconds after the trigger. So the trigger's in the middle, and you have 5 seconds of data before and 5 seconds of data after.
I have a couple of questions for you,
Please.
Dr. Welcher. First, starting with the clock, the time in seconds on the left. You mentioned that begins when the car is turned on. What type of clock is that called?
It's just a continuous clock, meaning it's not a clock like a time clock. It's more like a stopwatch kind of clock.
Has it ever been referred to as a running clock?
It's the same thing. You start the stopwatch, it's running.
Based on the Techstream data alone, found in that one spot, can you tell from the data in the Techstream alone what time the power was turned on?
No, not alone. It simply tells you how long it's been on. It doesn't necessarily immediately tie it back to a clock time. You need additional information.
And so this in and of itself, the Techstream data doesn't give you a certain time on a clock, like 1 o'clock or 2:30, anything like that.
No, it simply tells you in this case when the trigger occurred, it's been on for 19 minutes and 2 seconds.
You also mentioned that there's a 10-second window of information this captures, 5 seconds before the T and 5 seconds after the T, the triggering event?
Correct.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained, ask it differently.
That window of 10 seconds, what happens if that doesn't capture the entire event? What if there's something before or after? What does the Techstream data do?
So it depends on what the something is. So if there's another trigger, then it will record more data. So you can have two triggers that are recording things on the same time window as well, or very close to the same time window. So you need another trigger to keep it going. But in essence, what it does is when it sees a trigger, it saves that 10-second window and then just keeps monitoring things until it sees another trigger.
If the data captures a trigger, it has a 10-second window, and an event continues past that 10 seconds, so past the 5 seconds on either side, and there's no further trigger, do you get any other information from the Techstream data?
No. For example, in the trigger event, and say 5 seconds later the vehicle's still moving, well, the data just ends. And it says it's going, 17 miles an hour, for example. It doesn't continue on. We just know that when the trigger ended, it was going 17 miles an hour.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, so we have mileage recorded in this system. So what we're trying to do is use the available data to see if we can determine like what event this is, or is this the event, or is this something that could have occurred outside 34 Fairview on the evening of this event. And so one of the things we're utilizing is the mileage. Okay, so 12629 is at the end of event number 2 on the 1162 ignition cycle. When the vehicle ultimately comes into the impound yard, and this is actually before that, comes into the impound yard, it has 12,665 miles. That's a difference, did the math for you here, of 36 miles. Okay, let's consider where that could have come from. So we looked at the various paths and descriptions of where Miss Reed's Lexus was driven after leaving 34 Fairview on the night of this event, up until the point in time the vehicle ended up at the Canton Police Department. So we used Google Maps. We adjusted for the correct date and time of the year. And then what you'll also see is we adjusted for the correct time of day. So, although you can't really see that, let me see if I can blow it up. So you can see that's looking at the mileage and time. Again, really didn't use the time, just used the mileage on Saturday, January 29th at around 12 a.m. That, of course, does not take into account the weather.
And what are the addresses? It's hard to see on the top from where to where?
So this is from 34 Fairview to 1 Meadows Avenue, which is Mr. O'Keefe's residence.
And there are other mileage that you have there?
Correct. So we basically ran through the entire path as we understood it. Again, we didn't have complete information. We didn't know the exact roads. We didn't know if turned around, stuff like that. So you're seeing the suggested available paths, and we end up with a range of data. So we go through all the paths, and you can see that this is what we end up at the bottom here, which is very hard to see. So the minimum suggested route is 36 miles, 36.1 technically. You have a range of 37.9 to 39.7, but again, that's right in the range of the 36 miles. So that's a data point that's starting to build our confidence and what is in the Techstream data being related to our event.
This is all an effort to match whether or not the 1162 data is relevant to a particular event?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain.
Let me ask it this way. Matching all the distances by miles, is this the only way you're trying to determine whether 1162 is the event in front of 34 Fairview Road?
No. So again, these things are all tools. You can't take necessarily one data point in a vacuum. You need to consider the totality of the data